So good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening, wherever you are. For those of you that doesn't know me, my name is Ophir Gutelzon, co-founder of Unacceptable for Saving Israeli Democracy. And we are joined today by Avner Vilan, which I'll introduce in a second. We are day 17, I think, of the war, if we start to count it as the current war, and we are almost 3 weeks in. And just to recap, last night was a very tough night in Israel, and I assume that maybe tonight will be as well. Two elderly people were killed yesterday in Ramat Gan, and a lot of damage. Obviously, it's not happening just in Israel, it's around the Middle East. There is people, we have got the soldiers, the idea of going into Lebanon. Um, we are here today where Larjani was eliminated. We'll talk about that. Who is Iran's security chief? Iran retaliated with strikes. Oil prices are jumping. Strait of Hormuz is largely shut down. Anyway, I mean, like we are deep into the war, and today we are joined by Avner Vilan, and I'll put Avner on spotlight. Hey, Avner. Wow, you look so professional with your background. Thank you for joining us, Avner, and I'll just give a short intro about Avner, but obviously Avner will introduce himself. Avner is a friend, and he is been. I've known Avner for the last couple of years as we were fighting for democracy in Israel. But Avner today is here both as a pro-democracy fighter, but also as an expert on Iran. Spent the last 20 years on this topic in different capacities, and I'll let Avner introduce himself and talk about the relevant experience. Uh, Avner, thanks for joining us. And I want to start with the basic question. How did we get here? Like, why are we talking? Why are we in war? What's going on? So let's start.
Okay, so first of all, thank you, Ophir, for inviting me, and thanks for all of your wonderful work in the last 2 or 3 years fighting for Israeli democracy. Again, this is not just about Iran, but also fighting about who do we want to be. So thanks again for everything that you've done, and everybody on the call who's a supporter of our cause. And I'm going to excuse, since I am in Israel. There is a chance that we will have an alarm during this call. Hopefully we don't, but if that happens, I may have to excuse myself. But fingers crossed that we'll be okay. Um, oh, Ophir, you're muted if you.
Avner, I think your video is stopped from some reason.
Okay.
Now it's better.
Let me just.
Uh,
Uh, let's hope now I'm better. Okay. So I was saying that there's a chance, since I'm in Israel, there's a chance we'll have an alarm. Hopefully, the Iranians and the Hezbollah will give us an hour to speak. Um, so a short background about myself. I spent over 20 years working on in Israel's security establishment, most of them working on Iran, specifically from a technological perspective, and then from strategic operational perspective, mainly on Iran political and nuclear issues. But I've dealt with everything else on Iran, because Iran, everything's connected to everything. Um, I'm now in tech for the last few years. My current company is called AI 21. We built the Israeli LLM, but we could talk about that in a different section. Um, so how did we get here? I mean, I don't want to go to make this a history lesson, but we do need to go back to the eve of the June 12th Day War, because it wouldn't be right to think of these as two separate wars, but it's actually two phases of the same thing. Up until June, what Iran did is to accumulate a stockpile of 440, 450 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. The Iranian nuclear issue has been at the core of the Iranian problem. Throughout the years, we could go into that later if we want, but to make a long story short, to have nuclear capabilities, you need three things. You need the fissile material. In Iran, it's enriched uranium. You need the weaponization apparatus, taking that uranium and being able to explode it in a very precise manner, in a form factor that would fit into a rocket head. And the third is the rocket that would carry it to wherever you want. So rockets, they've proven that they've been able to shoot hundreds of them at Israel. Weaponization, they weren't actively working on it since 2003, but they did keep the group who was working on the nuclear weaponization work. They kept it intact, the same people working on similar adjacent things. And then the month building up to June, we've started to seeing them actually reviving some of the work that is directly related to nuclear issues. So that's very concerning. And at the end of the day, for a country like Iran, if they want to weaponize a uranium stockpile, it's something they could do within, let's say, 2 years. They've built more sophisticated technologies. They build drones, they build anti-tank missiles. They have the scientific capacity to build the nuclear weaponization mechanism. And it's very hard to track. So very concerning weaponization, starting to see him actually moving towards weaponization. And the most concerning thing is the stockpile. Iran took most of its 20% stockpile, which has some sort of excuse, a very bad excuse, which is to fuel their nuclear submarines. Does Iran have nuclear submarines? No, but they're already prepared enough fuel that would last them for 1,000 years or so. But anyways, they have some justification to have a 20% enriched uranium. They have no justification for 60%, and they took all the uranium that they have in 20% and converted it into 60%, which is 99% of the way to the 90% uranium that you need to create a nuclear bomb. So they were very, very close to acquire not just a single weapon, but an arsenal of about 11 nuclear warheads, or material that is sufficient for 11 nuclear warheads. So that was very concerning. And personally, I don't think that Israel had any option but actually to take action and take out the immediate threat, which is the enrichment facilities in Natanz and Fordo. And Israel could take care of Natanz by itself. It needed the U.S. Midnight Hammer bunker buster bombs from the B-2s that eliminated Fordo. And the 12-day war ended with Iran fully penetrated in terms of air defense. Their enrichment facilities um, hurt, not being able to operate. We don't really know how long it would take them to rebuild them. They weren't completely destroyed, but enough that it's not going to be an easy thing to get them up and running. And then the most concerning thing is the 440 or 450 kilos of enriched uranium.
Just to clarify, they had it in June when we started the first war, and they still have it
Mhm.
now.
Yeah, yes. So June ended with the 440 kilos. We did see the capacity of the Iranian missiles. Um, And then it was clear that the Iran issue, even though Netanyahu promised that now the threat has been eliminated for generations, anybody who knows a little bit about Iran knew that that's not the case. And the round was just a matter of time, and now we could say that IDF has been preparing ever since June for another round that was supposed to happen this summer, this June. Um, in January, or actually started in February, in December, we had probably the most the most challenging large scale protests within Iran against the regime. The reason was economical. The country is a wreck. The rial is not worth anything. They can't have a full day of electricity, continuous electricity in Tehran. You can't heat your home in the winter. You can't have air conditioning in the summer. Uh, huge water crisis in the country. So people pretty much had enough. They saw that all of their money that went into their defense mechanism, their missile programs, and their proxies proved pretty much useless in June. So people went to the street, and then President Trump went and say, "Hey, go out, take your government." So the Iranian people did, and they were butchered by the
He said
tens
it
of
also.
thousands.
He also said help is coming.
Yes, he said help is on the way, and help didn't come in January. The regime was very stressed out about it. They even brought in some militias from Iraq to help support the regime. Um, you know, uh, brutality. I don't know if you've seen the videos. I don't recommend watching them, but really terrible brutality by the regime just to crush these protests. Estimations are talking about 30 to 40,000 dead in Iran in a matter of a few days. Um, and the protests were suppressed. Um, but then it was clear that from various reasons, from the reason of the nuclear issues, from the missile capabilities, and Iran was building their missiles. I heard somewhere 100 missiles a month, really building a huge stockpile, wanting to get to about 20,000 of them, which would make the interception economy non-realistic. So if Iran has 20,000 missiles, we don't have enough interceptors. We don't have enough money to produce all these interceptors. So that was something that needed to be stopped. We had the civil rights and the support for the Iranian people. And then there is the larger context, and this is from a U.S. perspective, battle for energy, the competition with China, the Iran being a central, and you see the Middle East map behind me, a central crossroad for commerce between East and West. So for various reasons, it was a good. Iran needed to be taken care of, and it was a good opportunity for the U.S. to show its force. Um,
You mean the current war? Yeah.
yeah. Sorry if it wasn't clear. So yeah, I moved up
Yeah.
to now to
So
March.
let me
Yeah.
hold you hold back for a second. So to your point, there was a good reason to continue the war from June, even though we were promised by both President Trump that the nuclear was obliterated, and by Netanyahu that it was we are done for generations.
Hmm.
And I mean, and to your point, like the moment now. I mean, the question is like, what? I mean, so there is different goals for this war stated by different people. And to your understanding, I mean, are we there to topple the regime? Because you said there were protests. We said we're coming to help. Are we there to eliminate the nuclear? Are we there to eliminate the missiles? What are we doing there?
Yes. Uh, so I think it really depends on who you ask and when and what is the situation. Um, because Iran is a bad actor. I'm
There
going
is
to be
no doubt about that. Yeah.
I'm going to be the last one defending the Iranians. And I think the war or going into war right now has two ultimate goals, which is to completely eliminate Iran's nuclear capabilities which drills down to the uranium. And second is to change the regime. The problem with regime change is that this is something that you cannot promise. And there is no operational plan that you could say, I'm going to do A, B, and C, and then the regime would fall. So you could, at best, create the conditions for regime change, which was at the beginning of the war, this one of the stated goals. Now they don't talk about it as much because we see that even creating the condition for regime change seems more unlikely than after the first few days. But then, even if you put aside the nuclear issues and regime change, Iran's conventional military power, which is the missiles, the drones, their proxies, their entire military industrial complex, is something that has been threatening the region for a few decades and specifically in the last 5 to 10 years. They've spread their terror networks in all over the Middle East. You had the Houthis in Yemen, you had Hezbollah and Hamas and the Shiite militias in Iraq. And they were arming them with all of these Iranian missiles, drones, and military technology to create a ring of fire around Israel. But it's not just Israel, it's the entire Middle East. As we see today, they're holding the world's economy by the balls, pardon my French, by threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz, which they just did. And you have the Houthis at Bab el-Mandab, so it's even more than 20% of the world's oil that flows through there. So they were the military targets for the first 4 to 6 weeks, and we're 3 weeks in. We're to eliminate Iran's military capabilities. And the way it works is that there are actually like Excel files, huge Excel files with all these targets divided between Israel and the US of just going all to all of the sites that we know that are known military sites and destroying them one by one. This is a tedious work with hundreds of sorties per day that we just take care of them one by one. And this, as I understand, goes according to plan. So the war was planned, the way I understand it, with two overarching goals: nuclear regime change, but then one very specific, attainable goal, which is Iran's military capabilities. And this was the only thing that was fully planned with a 4 to 6 week operational plan, which we are doing right now. I don't know if the second phase, and this is called phase one, by the way. Even if you hear the briefing, everybody's talking about phase one. This is phase one, the first 4 to 6 weeks to take out their military capabilities. And then what would phase two look like? What are the goals for phase two? I I assume that there is some kind of plan. I'm not sure how fully detailed it is and how much the interests of Israel and the US are aligned on phase two. But I think that in phase one, there is, full alliance both from a strategic perspective as well as from an operational perspective. Maybe we could touch a little bit about that before moving on, Ophir.
Yeah, sure.
I think that we're seeing something remarkable when it comes to the Israeli US alliance. We haven't seen anything like that, not just between Israel and the US, but I would dare to say between two allies at any war. Even, if you go back to World War II, the level of coordination, the level of cooperation between these two armies, from all the way to the top to the bottom, is mind-blowing. The flow of information, the syncing between the planes of the two countries, it's really really amazing. And
Can
I'm
you give an
sure.
example for that?
Yeah, I mean, we have a joint set of targets, joint intel. We have Israeli intel feeding in real time US airplanes. You have US airplanes refueling Israeli airplanes, taking care of threats for each other. You have it's one of the Israeli generals said this is the first war that Israel is conducting in English. So there is like a U.S. attaché at all the different levels. This is truly amazing, and you hear it from both sides of the Atlantic. Also in the U.S., it's the first time in probably since World War II that U.S. is fighting a war with an ally that is pretty much equal to it. I'm not saying IDF is equal to to the U.S. Army or U.S. Armed Forces, but when it comes to Iran, and the amount of firepower and intel that we bring into the table, we are pretty much equal at at this war, and strategically thinking, long term, this is the upside when you look at the Israeli-U.S. relations. Uh, Probably Israel is the number one ally of the U.S. militarily in the world today. And also, when you hear about why do we need to fund Israel, why do we need to pay them all these um, foreign military funds. And now you got the answer. So Israeli were taking the U.S. platform, improving them, squeezing, sometimes 3 or 4 times more from the American airplanes than their American counterparts, uh, giving the lessons learned back to the U.S. Air Force and making it better. Taking care of some of the U.S. interests by attacking some of the U.S. interests. So I think that from a strategic cooperation. This is something very good and would provide all the pro-Israeli support and talking points that we will need because we are seeing the
Yeah,
surveys.
we'll dive into that
Okay, so I'm
later.
I'm just going to
Yeah.
stop there, but I'm saying there are good things happening in terms of the cooperation, and this will be learned in military schools in generations to come.
Well, we need to first get to the generations forward.
I agree. I agree.
I want to try and talk a little bit deep diver. I mean, like in your, I mean, if you don't follow Avner on X, then you should, and hopefully Avner will post it also on other places, not just on X. But in your latest post, I think you said something about that the measuring of success is and that's what you described: freedom of navigation, missile disruption, energy stability, regime cohesion, and negotiation shift.
Mhm.
Um, what does it look like right now? It's look like again freedom of navigation is pretty obvious, but what does the rest look like?
Okay, so just before going into all these metrics, and I will, um, I think that the reason we need to look at these metrics is because in 1 to 3 weeks, we're supposed to be at the end of phase one. And the situation of these five metrics at the end of phase one will determine the leverage US and Israel has, the freedom that US and Israel have to move on to other goals, whether it's regime change, whether it's negotiated agreement, getting the uranium out. We'll probably talk about the uranium later. And it would determine who won the first phase and who has the leverage when it comes to the next phases. So, freedom of navigation, Strait of Hormuz. Actually, you see the map behind me.
Actually,
This is
let me let me uh, let me share
the
my screen for a second.
all right. So you see Iran, the big cat in the middle, cat-shaped country, and then you have the Strait of Hormuz between Iran and Oman and the UAE. Yeah, I think we see your mouse there. Anyways, it actually says Strait of Hormuz, so it's great. And about 20% of the world's oil coming from Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar is flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. About a third of the world's fertilizers, a lot of natural gas. So this is a choke point about 20 something miles wide that Iranians control both the northern shore and you barely see it, but you have two islands there that enable Iran to block with torpedo boats, with mines, with drones, with surface to surface-to-sea missiles, and pretty much say, hey, no tankers are gonna cross through here.
And
Um,
just to clarify, this is like 20% of the oil in the world, right?
yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep. About 20% of the world's oil. And right now they're threatening to close it. And by the way, the Strait of Hormuz is open. You could actually sail through there. We have ships that the Iranians say that they can sail through there. That they actually go through, a few of them a day. But they are threatening that any tanker from the Persian Gulf that would want to get through, they will just sink it. So nobody wants to take the chance, and effectively the strait is closed. Um,
I think
I'm
that they
not
are
a
blaming the
naval
insurance
expert.
companies, right? It's the insurance that doesn't want
Yeah,
to
it's
insure.
it's it's not just the insurance because the U.S. already said that they're going to cover the insurance. It's this that fact that people don't want to be shot down by the Iranians, and
Yeah.
this is a real threat. So it's the insurance issue has been solved. Um, but anyways, there I'm not a naval expert. Um, the general gist is that militarily, the Strait of Hormuz can be opened, but it will take time. They're going to bring a third aircraft carrier to the area. They may need to bring in Marines. Um, but as long as the strait remains closed, this actually affects the leverage that Iran has, because this is what they've been threatening. That every war game to close the Strait of Hormuz, and they just did, and we see the effect on the oil prices. Before the war, it was $71 a barrel. Actually, if you go back to the State of the Union address a couple weeks before, it was 60 something, and now it's, I don't know, I didn't check today, but it's 100 or 110 or $115 a barrel, and it could go much higher. So
Avner, I mean, from a military perspective, I mean, like both, I mean, again, President Trump and others are saying like, well, I mean, like military-wise, we eliminated the military of, like, they don't have an airplanes, they don't have a navy, they don't have Iran. So how do they keep this strait closed? Like how they are basically retaliate on that?
yeah, so this is the gist of asymmetric warfare, because they don't need to be able to have a full navy, a full air force, or they could have 90% of their missiles eliminated, as long as they could hit a tanker every week or two with an Iranian Shahed drone shot from hundreds of kilometers away, and all of the U.S. battleships can't shoot it down. Or you have a speedboat going into one of them, and they have like those speedboats with explosives and mines. So as long as that happens, every week or two,
So
effectively you
that so
shut
you're talking
down.
about the attrition war,
Yes,
basically
yes.
that they
This
are
is a
doing.
war of attrition,
War of
and
attrition.
you need the strait to be safe enough to pass all these tankers that each of them is worth hundreds of millions of dollars and carrying hundreds of millions worth of oil through there. Not an easy task. So that's the first thing, freedom of navigation. Once the Strait of Hormuz is open, if it's open, and ships could go through, I think that would mean that Iran lost probably its strongest leverage point. Second is the ability to conduct commerce freely in the region. Iran has been shooting at, uh, um, I don't remember how many countries, I think 13 or 4 or some similar number. So anywhere from Jordan to Israel to Iraq, and of course all the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Oman, Qatar. Um, Commerce has been slowed down to say the least. Very few commercial flights, and generally speaking, people are staying at home, no schools, etc. If that continues for a long time, pressure to end this would continue. But if we get to a stage like Israel did with the Houthis, so for I think 2 years, Houthis every few days shot a missile at Israel, and life was because of the combination of air defense and the fact that it was so scattered, life went on in Israel. So if we could get to a stage where Iranian missile launches probably wouldn't go down to zero, but it would be something that would be tolerable enough that the region would reopen. I think that's another thing that would free a lot of the pressure that
Is the defense, the air defense system and alerts are similar in the Gulfies, like in the Gulf countries? Because commerce is probably more not necessarily just Israel. I mean, like there's huge of commerce over there, right?
so obviously not as good. Uh, um, one second. One second. Uh, so probably not as good. But they do have a lot of the American air defense systems that were deployed in the Gulf prior to the war. You know, there was this whole buildup of building both the offensive and defensive forces that took, a few weeks or even a few months leading up to this. So there are, in terms of defense systems, they're there, but they don't have all the shelters that Israel has. They don't even have the civilian obedience and knowledge of how to deal with that. People go to the UAE and to Saudi to do business because these are safe places, free trade, low taxes, etc. You don't want to be at a place that you could get shot by a missile every few days. It's not like Israel that you don't have choice or you'd have like the country's history. It's usually external commerce there.
Let's move
Um,
to energy
yeah.
stability.
So
'Cause
energy stability pretty much speaks for itself. I don't need to tell this audience the importance of oil prices and what it means for how much a gallon costs at the gas station, and what does it mean for the American voter. We have the midterms coming up. Um, I think this is pretty straightforward. It's going to be very affected by the first two factors. If the world believes that U.S. has it under control, I think oil prices will remain somehow manageable. I think that if they don't, they could actually spike up a lot more than they are today. So
So
we may be
the next one is regime cohesion, and I think it's relevant to just mention. I mean, like something that you wrote today. So we did see Laura Gina,
Larijani.
Larijani, right?
Hmm.
Assassination, elimination today. So what,
Yesterday.
right? So does it actually impact the regime cohesion, or who is he?
Yeah. Let's just finish the metrics, then I'll go back to the regime
Okay,
cohesion.
sounds
So we
good.
have two more metrics. Cohesion. Do we see at the beginning of cracks within the regime that possibility for regime change? And then one thing to keep in mind about Iran, the one thing that is most important for the Iranian regime, more than the nuclear weapons, more than the regional instability, more than exporting the revolution, is actually the survival of the regime itself. So if we starting to see cracks within the regime, I think the regime would be willing to make concessions and do whatever they need to continue the regime, like Khomeini ended the Iran-Iraq war by drinking the cup of poison or whatever, or however you translate it to English. So we may see something similar if the regime would fear for its own existence. And then the third is also something that we may see if we see Iran beginning to make concessions, open to giving up the uranium, open for negotiations. That would also be a strong signal of them starting taking the toll. So, but right now, all of these metrics are red. It means that if they don't start turning green in a week to 3 weeks, U.S. and Israel would be in a strategic problem because then, because of the war of attrition, time wouldn't be on our side. Because right now there is not a lot of pressure, but this is something that may change.
You keep saying U.S. and Israel don't see that. I mean, and the real question is like, does Israel and the U.S. has actually the same goals, right? I mean, like, I
So,
mean, obviously
so
the yeah.
yeah. So I think that yes and no, because I'll be a little bit provocative. For the U.S., Iran is a nuisance. For Israel, it's an existential threat. Um, so
So why did
um,
the U.S. go to the war?
I think it's an important nuisance. It's much easier, and when you look at the new strategic positioning that the U.S. is trying to do, make America great again, the new power structure. What does it mean to be an ally? The global war for energy and AI with China. So, in a lot of senses, to fight a war with Iran is a lot easier than to fight a war with China. And Iran is a problem. And It's a very good way to also test the strength of the U.S. Army in combat in case it's going to be needed in an actual world war. It's also a very strong signal to the world about the ambition of America and its willingness to use its force. So next conflict, next thing that they want to try to address when at least this administration threatens the use of force, they know that they're serious. So there are a lot of considerations that may not be easy to hear, but they are there that the U.S. is making about this war. And again, I think part of this administration's strategic thinking is that they don't want to postpone dealing with some of the world's problem or going just for diplomatic solutions. They're not afraid to use force. So I think that this is the American perspective that adds on top of everything that we've discussed. Uh, I'm not surprised that the nuclear issue uh, is not always top priority when it comes to the U.S. discourse. It's not that the U.S. wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon, but it's not the same level of threat that it is to Israel. Um,
So the
so,
imminent threat that was mentioned by President Trump is not related to the nuclear, to your point. It's something else.
so I think, and this is my interpretation, is that Iran was not an imminent threat to the U.S. at this point. It was a big threat. It was threatening to grow. It's a very big headache in the region, but it's not an imminent threat. And even like the nuclear, you could argue that after June, this is not an imminent threat anymore. You could monitor the nuclear material. You could make sure that they don't build a new enrichment facility. You could sanction them. You could do a lot of things on the nuclear front. Missiles, okay, they're going to rebuild some of them. You could still say, hey, we're going to meet this in a few years. But then I think Secretary Rubio said it in one of the interviews in the early days of the war. He said, well, if we didn't do anything now, and then in a few years we'd have a conflict with Iran that has 20,000 missiles, then I would be called to Congress and ask, why didn't you take care of it earlier? And here we are taking care of it when we have the advantage. And this is a viable point. It doesn't matter what you think about this administration. It's a logical argument that you're dealing with the threats when they're small enough and you can handle them. I think that as Israelis, this is one of the lessons that we learned from October 7th, that we can't allow to have threats growing in our region. It would probably help if you don't send them suitcases full of dollars, which is not the case with Iran, but still. So I think that in that case, it wasn't an imminent threat, but it was a threat indeed.
So let's dive a little bit deep into the definition of regime change. So I think that you mentioned that, and maybe we can elaborate that victory. I mean, what's the definition of victory, right? And one of them you mentioned is topple the regime, and the other one is getting rid of the nuclear threat. So let's dive
Yep.
first to the topple of the regime. And one of the things that we are seeing over and over is more and more assassinations of the leadership in Iran.
hmm
Is it helping us?
It's a good question.
I mean,
Personally, I
helping
got
us in achieving the goal of toppling the regime.
so I think that what we've seen since the beginning of the war, and all the assassinations are secondary to the opening strike of the war. We took out their Ali Khamenei, been ruling the country for 37 years, the symbol of the revolution. In many senses, the way that Iran was being managed is not by the position of the supreme leader, but Ali Khamenei himself, because of the way he managed the country for all these almost 4 decades. So I think that what happened is that we do see cohesion among the supporter of the regime, and they've taken the hardliner approach. If there could have been a world that people like Rouhani, like Zarif, like Pezeshkian, the president, and some others who may set the tone and say, hey, now maybe it's a good time to consider negotiation, maybe opening up to the world. We don't see that. We see the opposite. We see IRGC and their hardliners setting the tone in Iran. The election of Mujtaba Khamenei is probably the strongest signal to that.
Can you
He
elaborate
never
more on
held.
that?
Sorry?
Can you
Yeah, yeah.
elaborate more? Why
Yeah,
it's
so Mujtaba Khamenei never held an official office. He was close to his father, but never had a leadership position. Um, the public doesn't know him, hasn't spoken publicly, hasn't wrote anything. Um, so other than being his father's son and very close to the IRGC, um, why was he elected? He's not like a very high religious cleric. So I think that's a strong signal that IRGC is appointing a sympathetic leader or even somebody that they can control. And IRGC are uh,
what is the role of the IRGC? I'm not sure everyone knows.
so IRGC, Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps. It's Iran has mainly two armies. You have the Artesh, which is like the general army that needs to have the Air Force and the Navy and protect the country. But then the Revolutionary Guard, its role is to protect the revolution. It's and by the way, all the missiles that we see are part of the IRGC. They're not part of the Altesh. So it's an army, but it's also all of Iran's shadow economy, all of the oil economy, all of their power institutions in Iran is run by IRGC. Depends how you
So
count.
the
It's millions of
IRGC is
people.
like the FBI protecting the constitution. The IRGC is protecting the revolution.
Yeah, but think of an FBI that also runs the country's economy and has missiles to shoot at Canada and Mexico. So hardliners, very usually very religious. The death to America, death to Israel guys. Um, and they're setting the tone. They're running this war from the Iranian side, and from everything we see, and by the way, we don't see a lot from within Iran today. At least not openly, but I think also from an intel perspective, because they understand that whenever somebody can talk on some kind of a communication method, the chances of him getting a missile to where he is increase. So they're also not talking that much, but the position is that not giving in. This is the final war. We're standing up. We could fight this war for centuries. This is a religious war about the core of the revolution, etc. So if you understand that what happens is that the eliminations at the beginning of the war and as the war continues, there's not a general rally around the flag in Iran, but there is rally around the flag within the regime supporters. And the regime supporters, I don't know if it's 15% or 20 or 40%, but it's not. And all of these people are now willing to fight for the death to Iran and being more radicalized. And you see that the people that they elect are from the hardliner faction. So they for each role they have backups and backups and backups. So it's not like a small terror organization. If you take the leaders, it would cripple the organization. In Iran, it's a 90 million people country.
Avner, can
Uh,
you try to improve your internet? Something is really
not a
breaking.
single position.
We were talking
Well,
about
everybody
the hardliners
everybody
in the
has a replacement.
IRGC, and again, just to clarify, the IRGC is like I think I read it's 1.3 million people out of the 90 million people in Iran.
Hmm.
It's not a small group of a militia, right? It's a country.
Yep,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. It's millions of people, 1.3, 2 million, but that's the order of magnitude. Some of them are just like running the economy. About the military part, about 300,000. Still a lot of people.
a lot of people.
Uh,
Uh,
um,
So the
so
next
all of
generation,
them have
after
a
you
replacement.
eliminate those leaders, what does the next generation look like?
So you have some of the historic leaders, starting from Khamenei himself, and then you got Larijani and Shamkhani and Kalibaf and all these people. These are people who grew up with two main events. One is the revolution. They remember the corrupt Shah in before 1979, and they had the popular support of the people. It was like a communist, back to family values, back to religious values, anti-corruption revolution. They had the popular support in 1979. And then you had the Iran-Iraq War. This is where they met. This is where they bonded, and you had the same people who were running the country for the last 30 years or so, just switching like musical chairs between them, between the different roles, Minister of Defense, head of the Joint Chiefs, head of the SNSC, etc. What happens now that most of these guys are now gone, or a lot of them are gone, and you have a younger generation, a generation that grew up post Iran-Iraq War, very religious, very not educated, not open to the West, doesn't see a lot of Western culture, Western perspective. They're in their echo chamber of death to America, death to Israel approach. Ignorant, corrupt, um, feeding off of each other, incompetent, if I may, are much less competent than their previous generation. Um, and these are the people who are now, the hotheads taking power, if you will. Um, this is what we're seeing. We started to see this trend before June, before this war, and now with a lot of the traditional leaders eliminated, this creates a vacuum where these types of people could step in, and this is what we're seeing today.
Okay. So I think that we'll start. I mean, I'm starting to pick up some questions from the audience, but I mean, one of the clear questions that is keep coming up, and is that again we covered one side of the victory, and the other side, and one of the things you keep writing about that if we don't, in order, if we, President Trump is declaring victory at any point of time and the regime is not toppled, as we heard. I mean, there is a lot of people, there is a lot of backlog of leaders in this regime, and we also hearing that there is not a lot of local organizing and military that can actually take over this IRGC. The next part is that they are staying, the regime is staying, and the uranium is still there. What does it
Hmm.
mean? And can we actually win the war if both of them are not eliminated?
Yeah, just to close on the regime change, I'm not sure. I'm not saying the regime change is possible. It's impossible. I think that it doesn't seem that it is now. We could talk about what it looks like if you're interested. It could happen in a second, but we're just not seeing this. And most importantly, it's not something that you could plan. So I think that, the regime there is weak. We had the millions of people going out of the street. Mid to long term, I don't think this regime would survive. Um, but I'll be very cautious in predicting how would that regime change look like, and is it possible in the near future? But it's not a work plan. You can't say that I'm going to do X and then regime change would happen. So to your question, to the nuclear issues. So if
And
one
I'm going
thing
to
you
put on the screen where we might think that the nuclear uranium
yeah,
is. just in the case that we know.
Okay, we could do that in a second.
Okay.
But before to get that, I think that one thing that Iran learned after June, and definitely after today, is that their only viable insurance policy is to have a nuclear weapon. So even if it's temporarily blocked, I think that they have probably the highest motivation ever to acquire a nuclear weapon. We started, by the way, hearing them speak about it publicly, that maybe they need to rethink their nuclear policy because they didn't acquire nuclear weapons and then they got invaded. And I think they're right, by the way.
And it's a big change because I mean, as far as I remember, there is like a Sharia law, right, or something like
It's
that.
not Sharia law. It's a fatwa by the
It's a fatwa.
by
Sorry, it's a fatwa that
yeah, but
basically,
the thing about religious fatwa by political leaders is that you could twist them any way you want,
yeah.
and not just in Iran. I think that I would. I mean, there is a fatwa. I don't think this is the one this is what blocked Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. I think that they look at it from a strategic perspective throughout the year and didn't want to take the risk of going all the way. They tried to have of a strategy of gaining the success, the benefits of being a nuclear country without paying the risks. Anyways, now Iran has the motivation to acquire a nuclear weapon. They have the material. The problem with the material is that this is like really close to the bomb. So they could, if they even if they have a small enrichment facility, uh, could be clandestine, could be in a sports hall in eastern of Iran, a few hundreds of centrifuges spinning. They could take all of that nuclear material, which could fit in a backpack. It's not something big, and translate that into few nuclear warheads. This is something very concerning. If they don't have the material, they could still do it, but it would take him a lot longer because to enrich from 60% to 90% is a matter of days or weeks. So this is why it's so concerning. Um, there are other tractions they could start, like I said, from naturally enriched uranium, but then it would just take them a lot longer. Um, they could buy a weapon from North Korea, probably, or lesser chance from Russia or China. Something that you need to monitor. But right now, as long as the material is in Iran, there is a scenario where they could quickly turn it into a weapon, or at least fissile material for a weapon. You could bring up the map. The way that I understand it, it's spread across probably three locations. Um, uh,
Can we see the map? Yeah.
sorry, I think I have an alarm.
Do you have an
Sorry.
alarm?
Yeah, I think we have an alarm. So
They were almost patient until
well,
the time.
I'm not sure this is actually an alarm, but I have people. I'm actually from the safe room right now.
Okay,
Uh,
so let's
but
have the whole family
hello,
join.
אתם רוצים להיכנס? Sorry. All right. Sorry. So
Okay,
one second.
let me stop the share the screen so we can. Okay, okay. I think that I hear that Avner is back.
Yes. Hi. Sorry about that.
I
Yeah,
mean,
we had an alarm here without an advance warning, but it seems to be
okay,
over. So I'm back. Sorry about that. Life in
okay.
Israel the last
So
3 weeks.
I think that the main one of the question that was raised, and I don't know, I mean, like I want to finish the conversation before we get to the question, and I know that Avner can stay a couple of more minutes. Um,
Mhm.
and Avner, I want you to kind of like take us to this point of I mean the topic of this discussion was the measurement of victory. And we talked about the nuclear sites and we talked about the regime toppling. The real question is no, the other question is, can we learn anything from the war that we were fighting in the last 2.5 years, right? With Hezbollah, with Hamas. anything about the idea that you said, like maybe we'll have 1 or 3 weeks to actually finish the military goals. But
Mhm.
what then? What's next after that? Can we learn anything from the past to the future here?
So I think that after the first phase, there are three options, three outcomes, three possible outcomes, and best case scenario, there is a regime change. There are things that we could do to maybe encourage a regime change, call out to the Iranian people, now it's your turn, go out to the street, let's see what happens. Worth a shot. If that happens, great. Second is a negotiated agreement with this regime. This could be with the desired outcome is no nuclear material within Iran, very limited missile capabilities, and other requirements. I don't know I don't know about the possibility or the likelihood, but again, a diplomatic true solution is something that we should aim for. And then a third option is that we'll have this regime, we don't have a negotiated agreement, and either a declared ceasefire or some level of hostility continuing until we're going to have the next round. And I think that this is a possible outcome that is not necessarily worse than not starting this war, but I think that this is something that we need to understand that if that's the case, because Iran, like I said, is bad, doing all these bad things, trying to, they're trying to build their ring of fire, had to have the October, the vision of Qasem Soleimani to have October 7th from all around Israel and actually threaten our core existence is something that we need to account for. Um, but then we need to be honest with ourselves and not declare total victory
A
uh,
victory for generations.
or victory for generations, but to be true both for ourselves and to the public. I think that building the diplomatic solution is key, whether it's something that is attainable at the end of the war, or maybe if we understand we need time to build it. But the war itself should not be a goal. And let's look at what happened in Gaza. In Gaza, there was a total military victory over Hamas. I live near Gaza. They're about 15 kilometers that way. And I just saw videos this week of Hamas terrorists on their same Toyota pickup trucks holding their weapons as if nothing happened. Why? Because Israel did not build an alternative for Hamas. And at the end of the day, the Americans just said, hey, we've had enough, cut this out. And we have Hamas rebuilding because there was no um, other alternative that Israel wanted. It just said what we can't allow to happen, but they didn't say what we do want to build. And this is the problem with the government. It's you have to look at the use of force and war as just means to an end. It can't be the end itself. And the end should be some kind of a better equilibrium in which you could live with. Who do you want to control Iran? Or if you can't control it, where do you want them to be? How does it going to look like? Because we want to have a country or a Middle East that we want to raise our children in. And I think that a weak Iran is good. A regime change in Iran is great. I think that all the victories since October 7th, the toppling of the Shiite axis is great for the country. We're creating history in reshaping the Middle East, but it's not just about defeating the threats, but it's also about, what are we building instead? So
Yeah, and again, I mean, like we're defeating the threats in such a way that we are keep. I mean, I would say that we are keep fighting the war, as you said. I mean, like because we're not ending. We don't have a political end game in that sense. There is there is a question about the nuclear material that I want you to cover if it's even possible. And I don't think we shared the screen. We ended up by not sharing the screen, but
Mhm.
if those like how big is the nuclear material? Is it like the backpack thing? Like
So
people are
the,
kind of
the, the
like keep.
uranium itself is very small. It's small and heavy. It's the nuclear mass is 238. But it's in three places. You can see here in Isfahan, in Natanz and Fordo, on the center of the country. Um, Most of it is in Isfahan, buried underground. It's in the tunnels that were hit in June. As far as I know, as far as we know, the Iranians haven't gotten to them. Um, it's there. It's like in gas canisters, like home gas canisters, cooking gas canisters, stored in that form. Um,
And so it's not really hard to basically spread them around, like, and how can you find them if it's not through negotiation, can you actually find them through boots on
I
the
think.
ground?
Yeah, I think we pretty much know where they are.
Okay.
Otherwise, we would hear completely different music from Israel and the US. Up until I think May 17th was the last time that IAEA inspectors were in Iran and actually saw the material. So it's not something that you don't know where it is. The Iranians may moved it a little bit, but I think we've proven that our intel coverage of Iran is pretty good. So I don't think that right now, at least, it's gone. It's under the rubbles, but I know which rubbles. I think we know which rubbles they're under. Militarily, it's a complex operation, but I don't think it's impossible. Iranians know where it is. They're expecting us. So if somebody wants to grab it with boots on the ground, it's not like a commando operation of sending a Delta Force and doing an overnight operation. It's sending a massive amount of troops, maybe with heavy machinery to dig. They don't know exactly what the situation of the material is. You need to secure their perimeters. The Iranians are going to try to attack this such kind of operation. There will be casualties. So yes, boots on the ground. um, a complex operation would probably take days at least. But this is not Iraq boots on the ground taking over the entire country.
Yeah.
Is it something that either US or Israel or is that like a risk we're willing to take? I don't know. But I think that I wouldn't rule it completely off the table.
Okay. So, Avner, I want to really thank you for joining us. I know it was long and a lot of details. Any last words you want to finish with before we are stop the recording, and then we can stay around for a little bit more for questions.
Um, I think that in the world of identity politics and everything that is going on, it's hard to separate the interests, the political interests, the personal interests from the leaders and the geopolitical interests of the countries. And this is a challenge. And I think that hopefully we'll be back at the situation where the interests of the country's leaders and the interests of the countries will be enough aligned that we could have
So we can trust our leaders doing the right things
we
when
could
in the
have
end.
this conversation in a clear way like we used to have and deal with our very tough geopolitical problems and we didn't talk about the Israel-US relationship and Israel's position in the US and there are other problems that we need to deal
We
with.
didn't talk about allies and
Yeah.
NATO and
Right. So there are a lot of things that are hard and we need to deal with, and hopefully we'll be back to a normal political situation. We could talk substance and not
yeah.
slogans.
Thank you so much, Avner, and thank you everyone for joining. And we'll meet again probably next week, talking about other issues. But again, I mean, the focus is still on, again, of our focus is still eyes on the ball. The elections are coming. We have to get through that, and we have to make sure Israel stay on track to be Jewish and democratic. And we have a lot of talk about the judicial overall that keep going and all the other things. So eyes on the ball. Stay safe over there in Israel. Stay safe wherever you are. I mean, like it's becoming unsafe also here in some way. So wherever you are, stay safe, and we will get through that. Bye bye.